Keith Wallahan is the Liberal MP for the seat of Menzies. Morning, Keith.
Good morning, Raf. How are you?
Did you listen to Donald Trump's speech?
I did. I had designs when I set my alarm clock to do this at the gym and multitask. And instead, when my daughter came in wanting to be held, she was complaining that I was watching it on my phone and it was too loud. So I tried to multitask with family.
Work.
No. So I saw most of it drifting in and out of sleep.
What did you make of it?
I thought it was fascinating. It was shorter than I expected. We've seen other Trump speeches that have gone on for quite a while. So this one, I think, was under 30 minutes. And it was insight into his priorities. He was crystal clear. It's America first, and there are challenges and opportunities for Australia in that administration.
What are the? Tell me one challenge and one opportunity.
One challenge is an America First administration is more utilitarian and transactional in how they deal with other countries. There's a focus on each deal rather than alliances. So we have enormous history with the United States. I myself have served in the United States task force in Afghanistan. But I don't think we can rest on that. I think we now need to, in every dealing with the United States, prove that there's something in it for them as well as us. And
Does that worry you? I'd forgotten about your military career. Does it make you nervous in any way?
Not really. I think the United States is bigger than one person, and any administration is bigger.
Is my question, is it still bigger than just one person?
It is, and he is a significant president in terms of his speeches matter, this ceremony matters, and we need to lean in with all of the other connections that we have. And one thing I do know from the military is that our liaison network throughout the United States military is extensive.
It's hundreds of people, isn't it?
It is. And not just in the Defence Force, but in defence industry, in technology companies, and then our diplomatic network throughout the United States is huge. And they're all leaning in to make sure that we put Australia first, and that's our mission.
Keith Wallahan is the Liberal MP for the seat of Menzies. I've mentioned before that if he stands in his office in Doncaster, he doesn't see too many federal Liberal colleagues. In fact, I'm not sure if he can see any. There are not many Liberal seats in either the centre of Melbourne. There are no Liberal seats on the harbour in Sydney. That makes it a tall order for Peter Dutton to simply win the next election. That you've got to win seats in the big cities, you would think. One more thing, Keith Wallahan, before I get on to, I know you're going to go door knocking this afternoon. I want to know what you're going to be asking about. One more question. You've been in the military. It looked like Elon Musk was giving a fascist salute. Does that give you any pause for thought?
I saw that image. It seems out of character with him. So the intent of someone's actions is always what counts.
I don't know. I'm not sure if
it looked clumsy to me.
It looked clumsy?
It looked clumsy.
He said some...
He's a clumsy person. He's also a very clever
AFD,
person.
who are deemed an extremist far-right organisation by Germany's own political party. So it's not 100% disconnected from the things he's been saying on his own social media platform.
Look, when Elon might have particular views on particular parties in particular countries, but when you look at all of the core definitions of fascists and fascism, I wouldn't put Elon in that category at all.
I'm going to start with a question from a caller, if I can. It's not in your seat, but
Sure.
Christy's calling from Preston on 1300 222 774. Christy, what's your question?
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call. It's still illegal to lie in political campaigns in Australia. And given the changes made by Mark Zuckerberg in the last week prior to the inauguration and no more fact-checking, and there's a crossbench bill before Parliament now, what are the Liberal Party going to do to make sure that you can no longer lie in political campaigns in Australia for the next federal election?
Keith?
Hi, Christy. Thank you for that question. I, myself and my colleagues, no one likes lying in politics. No one does it. But the problem with this well-intended proposal is that to put it into practice just doesn't work. You're asking independent people to make decisions about what is truth or not. And in a previous life, I wasn't just in the military, I was a lawyer. And one of the most litigated provisions in Australian law is the misleading and deceptive conduct provision in the Australian consumer law. I was in the Supreme Court of Victoria for over a year in a long, protracted litigation about the definitions of those words. So the intent, I understand, I get it. We want truth in politics, but it doesn't work to outsource that to an institution. It's an abdication of power.
People, I mean, you know this.
I know
drives
it does.
people crazy. Politicians lie all the time. Make it illegal.
And I think there's a broader issue at play, which is character matters. It really matters. And so for people like me and for my colleagues, we have to make sure that we conduct ourselves in a truthful way and that we engage in the ideas and we treat our voters with respect and make sure that how we conduct ourselves matters most.
Keith Wallahan's the Liberal MP for the seat of Menzies right here in Melbourne. It's sort of Doncaster and surrounds. We are bringing back polygraph for the federal election, so every Tuesday you'll get a chance to ask your own questions of some of the politicians involved in the federal fight that will go through until... I don't know when it's going to go through till. It might go through until May. Who knows when the federal election will be called. But if you want to ask Keith a question, 1300 222 774, and we'll have a range of politicians here on a Tuesday. Keith, maybe let's... You've already been doing a lot of door knocking. I should tell people Keith's got a Keith Wallahan vest on so he can identify, so people know who he is when he goes to knock on their door. Top three things people say they're concerned about when you go door knocking. What are they?
Sure. The first one is that they're living paycheck to paycheck, and it doesn't matter the wealth of a particular suburb. That is common throughout Melbourne. So people are really struggling, and they're making sacrifices on the back of that. The second thing is crime. Crime is coming up more and more, and I know it's a state issue, but when people see a member of parliament knock on their door, they tell them what matters to them right there at that moment. And you'll be standing at someone's doorstep and they'll point and they'll say, that house was broken into, that one tried to be broken into. And people share that on their local WhatsApp groups or the Facebook groups. And so they have a sense of what's happening in their community. And then the third one is roads and congestion. We live in an area that is either side of the Eastern Freeway. People know that, yes, it's a project for the North East Link that will deliver benefits at the end of 2028.
It's a big project, though. It's very disruptive.
It is, but in the meantime, it is full of graffiti, full of rubbish.
People mention the graffiti on the freeway.
They do, and just graffiti throughout Melbourne in general. If you go
Bob
to
and Charnel were talking about that this morning.
If you go to other cities, like I was in Adelaide before Christmas, and I didn't expect to say this about Adelaide, but I said, oh, wow, what a clean city. There's no graffiti, no rubbish. And that's a real credit to them. We don't often give Adelaide a pat on the back like that. But something's happened in Melbourne where it's a dirtier city. It needs to be cleaned up. And if you let that fester, that it encourages other crime to occur.
I might come back to cost of living. Richard's got a question from Doncaster, actually. Richard, are you in Keith's seat?
Yes.
I'm assuming you are, but I never know if people are working there or whatever. What's your question?
So, I like the way Keith. I like what he's saying, and he's. I guess my question is, how can we have a situation where we can endorse more Libs like Keith and not the sort of thing that Peter Dutton is putting out there? Because it's just too far off to extreme right.
So I guess you're asking, can you vote for Keith but not his leader at the moment? That's your question, isn't it?
Essentially,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's essentially it. Yes.
Not a simple question for Keith to answer, but there you go. What do you make? What's your response to Richard?
Thank you for calling in, Richard. In the end, in election, all of us, there's 150 names will be on the ballot papers in the House of Representatives. Well, there'll be many more than that, but 150 will get elected. But our elections are more and more presidential. I know there is a cartoon image of Peter Dutton, and the Peter Dutton that I know, that's just not who he is. It's not who he is at all. He is a focused, decent, clever, committed person who is in this to make a difference. He's in it to make a difference. So we'll see a lot more of Peter and the Prime Minister in the coming election.
Two things Peter Dutton said. I've actually asked him about him when he's sitting in the chair, but two things he's said that I think people in Melbourne know for. African gangs, can't go out to restaurants because of the African gangs. And he made comments essentially saying some of the Lebanese immigrants admitted to this country that the Fraser government made mistakes. It's fair to critique him for those comments, isn't it?
Well, you can critique all of us for all of our comments. And in his career, he's elected in 2001, there is a vast catalogue of comments, and to find ones that people don't like or disagree with, that's pretty easy to do. But you've got to judge people on their reaction to the problems now. And I know, particularly on Multicultural Australia, and my seat is 70% first or second generation migrants.
70%?
70%.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of the highest. And the national average is 50%. So Peter is fully committed. And I'll give you an example. So my seat has the largest Chinese diaspora in Australia. And I have engaged in that community regularly. In fact, I think I've got 3 or 4 Lunar New Year events every day for the next few weeks.
Right.
And so I have to watch my weight. But I actually talked to Peter about those, and one of his favourite foods is yum cha. And we've had that in Doncaster. I don't want to name the restaurant or give them a shout out, but he talks about multicultural Australia in a really sincere, engaged way. So again, the cartoon image of Peter is quite different to the real Peter.
Cost of living. This is both a budget and a cost of living question. The Liberal Party you oppose changing the tax cuts, you opposed energy bill relief, you opposed price caps on energy. All of those things ended up putting more money in people's pockets when they're doing it hard. Why would you oppose giving people help? Why would you describe them as sugar hits?
Yeah, I understand that the headline that comes with that, and it's a proper question to put to me. I think there's 2 focuses that you can have on the inflation crisis. One is that you focus on addressing the causes of inflation, which we're committed to, or you can focus on the symptoms. And of course, the symptoms matter, and that includes subsidies and giving people discounts. But it's contributing to the problem as well. And so what we know in many areas, there's a 10-to-1 ratio. If a cost of a good or a service or gas has gone up by $100, to offset that by $10, it may feel good for the politician promising it, and it may feel good to help.
Price cap doesn't cost you anything.
Well, there is a cost to all of this. There is a cost to all of this because every government intervention, particularly where it involves spending, we know from the Reserve Bank that has made their task harder, and that has meant that inflation is higher for longer, which then flows through to interest rates. And so this debate between fiscal and monetary policy is a real one. And the role for fiscal policy is to make sure that government lives within its means.
So, okay, so if your attitude to things like a bit of help with the energy bills is don't spend because it contributes to the problem, why is your approach to the energy price problem? Like if my electricity costs a lot, why is your solution to spend hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars on nuclear power plants that I also won't see for I don't know how long, at least 10 years, if not 20 or 30 years? How does the nuclear policy fit into the spend less Liberal idea?
Sure, because in a way they're connected but separate. They're connected in that, of course, it's about our energy bills, but about the energy bills in 2050 and beyond. And people often lament that we don't, as politicians, talk about the future and the coming decades. And that's what this debate is about. And I'm not going to pretend a nuclear power plant is going to offset bills here and now. Of course, it's in the future. But the energy transition, if you're committed to net zero by 2050, which we are, that transition is expensive no matter which way you spin it.
Sure.
So it's about choosing our poison for that. And I mean that in terms of a spending sense. So the transition is expensive, it's complex, it's difficult. And we think there is a better way to do that when nuclear is part of the mix, about a 30% part of the mix.
Final question, and just a reminder, we will get... let's bring in Goran in... Goran's calling from Malvern, so it's not the final question. Goran, go for it.
I just wanted to ask the Liberal rep about the royalties from minerals and gas, charging multinational companies. What are the Liberals going to do about it?
So I presume you want to charge more. You want multinationals to pay more when they extract resources. Is that what you mean?
In the same way that they're actually doing in Qatar and Norway.
Sure. Understood. Is there going to be action on that, Keith Wallahan?
I think one of the challenges that we face with the Trump administration is that an America first focus on energy security for their own country will mean there'll be less demand for Australian energy resources. So whether it's in your super fund or in the other connections to the economy, and including all of the company tax that's paid and other taxes that are paid by our resource companies, I think it's in Australia's interest that they are successful and competitive.
So that's a no, unlikely to tax them more.
I'm not going to rule in or rule out, what we're going to do going forward, but we want to make sure that they're competitive because they're going to have extra competition, particularly with the Trump administration.
This is my final question. We're going to have a chat actually to one of the South Australian ministers in a moment. I don't think you knew this question was coming. They are going to change some rules so that the car parking spaces and car parking garages are bigger. We're importing more and more really large cars. On the fly, do we need to make car parking spaces bigger so people can fit these massive super utes in them?
You've triggered a core memory for me, Raf. When I was young, my first car was this old 1970s Ford, and whenever I'd go and try and park it, the front left and back right corners would almost touch as I went through those spirals.
Yeah.
So I'm guilty of having a bigger than normal car from when I was young. I don't now, but I have noticed that. I have noticed those big...
They're monsters.
They're huge, and then they have extra wide wheels, and I can understand why that's a consideration.
Does that jive well with net zero 2050, having massive cars burning up lots of fuel?
Well, it depends how they're built and what they're powered by.
Might be electric.
Yeah, that's right. The Elon Musk's...
Go on, I'll try and pin you down. Bigger car parking spots or not? Do we need them?
I think it's driven by the market. If there's more bigger cars, then you need them. And again, it's not for a government to decide. I think the providers can sort this out. That's what a free market does.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.